Welcome to Y11 Audio. I'm Alex Alvarado. Thank you for listening. This is the final episode of the positional breakdowns in previews weeks. Did all of the offensive stuff last week. We did defense the last few days leading up to this moment where we're now going to switch over to special teams. The unforgotten, well, I shouldn't say unforgotten because we're not going to forget them, but the mostly forgotten phase of football. Usually overlooked, but in this program, how could you talk about, getting into the right direction, getting into multiple upsets over Big Ten opponents in the pre-COVID era, right, in the 2010s? How could you talk about the upswing of Eastern Michigan without talking about how special teams has produced, and how can we talk about, hey, what do we expect out of EMU moving forward without doing that, without recognizing this side of the field? Kickers, punters, they don't get the same attention that, your favorite wide receiver with the biggest grab, or the running back who just loves to lower their shoulder, or the safety who just loves to screw up both of those wide receivers and running backs. These guys don't get the attention that most others on the football field obviously get. But like I said, how could you, sure, the Rutgers win wasn't big for the special teams, but the Purdue win, the Illinois game, you can't talk about the finishes without mentioning Chad Ryland. You can't do that. And hoped to see more of the same out of Jesus Gomez, Mitch Tomasek. Not to say that they've been bad or anything like that, but, you just want to see more of that magic out of them moving forward. And the hope is, can it happen? Can it happen? Can it happen because of them? So this is going to be a quick episode. This isn't going to be super, super long. I'll keep the conversational format the same. We're going to go through kind of over the years what it's sort of looked like. I have a bunch of other numbers that I have pulled up on my screen too to kind of look at special teams because I don't have too many people to talk about. The guys that are coming back have been around and have been the go-to kicker and punter over the past couple of years. I don't really expect much of a change there. But hey, if I'm wrong about that's okay. That's okay to be surprised during the year. I've been going to Pro Football Focus for a lot of numbers. For this episode, I did not go to Pro Football Focus. I went to BCF Toys, a really good stats website. It has some ratings for offense, has defense, also has special teams ratings too. We're just going to focus on the special teams stuff that's offered there. They have special teams efficiency, so just think, so to speak, an arm wrestling match between the two sides, right? Take out garbage time, take out the offensive production, take out the defensive production. How are teams wrestling against one another on field goals, punts, kickoffs? Yeah, actually just those. What does the arm wrestling match look like between the two? Or the tug of war. How about that? The tug of war. Over the past few years, I have it all the way back. Well, the website allowed it for me. But I have the numbers all the way back to 2017. We're not going to get too crazy with it. But overall, special teams efficiency for EMU. Nationally ranked from 2017 through last year. 2017 was the year before Chad Ryland got started kicking, but it was Jake Julian's first year punting, just to give you some sort of reference point there. But EMU, since 2017, it was ranked 77th, then 86th, 108th, leading up to COVID. Then the COVID year, 65, then coming out of it, 25, 33 in the bowl winning year, and then last year dropped all the way back down to 96. Not a spot that EMU wants to be at again. Again, there's a whole bunch of different factors that came into place, right? You had the good years out of Chad Ryland. His first year kicking wasn't actually super great. He was 12 of 20 as a field goal kicker, and that's pretty evident in the field goal efficiency too. Before he started kicking, EMU was 75th in field goal efficiency, and then his first year kicking as Chad Ryland, 123rd. But obviously he got things moving. He got things moving in the right direction, right? Because he even remembers that he was super, super cold before the, which one was it in 2018? That was Illinois, right? He said he was feeling really cold before that, but that was like the kick that like really, really got him going and like actually gave him confidence, not just for that season, but seasons to come, right? Since then, since going 123rd, the team went 47th, then 21 in COVID, and then over the past few years, 32, 23, and 23 again. How did the other side do? Well, that doesn't really matter. We're not going to go too far with that. But EMU has mostly, other than like the 2017 season, ever since then has out field goal efficiency'd the other side generally. Has usually just like posted better numbers. Punt efficiency. So how are you doing booming that ball across the field versus, your kick return unit? How are you guys doing against that? The kick return unit, that's always like hard for me to just like, I don't know. Like EMU is already like a tough place to get to in terms of like gathering talent and all that stuff and like getting the guys that you want. Fielding an effective punt return unit just as a college football team, I imagine that is just like very, very difficult. And just having like the efficiency that you want, it just requires the right kind of opportunity half the time. Like you got to have, there's always like the special guys who can just make it happen, right? When you think about kick returns, like Jalen Jackson was that guy. Hamza El-Zayat made some plays. We'll get to those numbers in a little bit. But guys that just like absolutely make plays out there speak for themselves. Guys that are at least in like the second tier or lower of guys that you want to throw out there, at whether you're at EMU or Alabama or wherever, right? Like not having the elite talents out there, it gets very, very difficult to manufacture the production out of those units just because in punting, like, first of all, so much of that hinges on, like, the defense doing its part, right? Like, getting stops in certain spots of the field, right? Like, if you're getting a stop at, like, their 20 as opposed to, like, their 45, the punt's just going to be, like, different, right? The demand out of that punter to like get it downfield, but also the coverage is just like just so much depends on like where that kick is happening from, how far it even goes, is it even accurate, is it even deep, and how good is the coverage, and also like the frequency of punts. Like we're talking about, I don't know, maybe what's an average number of punts a game, like somewhere between like 4 and 7 usually, depending. Like 7's a bad number to be at anyways, but a handful, right? It's not like it's the biggest thing of opportunities. If we're talking about efficiency on offense, if we're talking about efficiency on defense, yeah, they're on the field 75 snaps a game. But for the special teams, it's just kind of hard to be like, okay, this is truly how efficient you were. But it truly was how efficient they were in like the limited opportunities that they had. Still looking at the punt, when EMU's punting, since 2017, it was 104th. That's really bad. But since then, it's been really, really good. It's been a top 20 unit ever since 2020. Going from 2018, it went 69, 59, 1, 12, 13, 19 as a punting unit. Obviously, Jake Julian's been really good. He was, somebody that probably should have had more opportunity in the NFL than he did. I don't know. Maybe I'm just speaking at church. Had a quick cup of coffee with New England, not too long. He probably had to pay his own tab there. But now it's cool that he gets to see Chad Ryland suit up for the Patriots. And now with Mitch Tomasek, who's probably a better punter than Jake Julian was. I love Mitch Tomasek. It's no surprise to me that he was able to just keep things going, keep things moving, and like as like a top 20 unit as a punter, has the leg to just like boom it 70 yards. Maybe not 100% of the time, but he has that ability for sure. Actually had like a 70+ one wiped away last year from like from a penalty. Anyways, as a punt return unit, which is like from harder to like judge. Obviously, you got to like I said, you got to have the right guys out there. You got to have the right opportunities, and spots on the field and all that stuff, right? As a punt return unit, which is, this team hasn't always had like the best punt returner, but it's most important job out there for whoever gets out there, whether or not you're going to get the long returns. You have to make the right grab, right? You have to be able to judge that kick, get under it in the right spot, get under there in a timely fashion, and make the clean catch. That's hard, man. That is not easy to do. Punt return efficiency from 2017, 64, 15, 34, 100. 100 in punt return efficiency the same year that EMU was the number one punt efficiency unit. 100 on the return, 41, 78, and then last year 109. Whew. That's hard. That's hard to do. And that's with some good guys out there. That's with Hamza El-Zayed out there as the punt returner. That's with Jalen Jackson, but he was more of a kick returner anyways. Speaking of kick returners, let's talk about the kickoff efficiency. Yeah, hard to really do, especially with like the rules changes that with the fair catch rule change over the years. I don't exactly remember when that took place, but I do think that took over a little bit before 2017, if I recall. It's all the rule changes is kind of hard to remember the timeline and all those, but I remember that definitely predates the portal, which I think was a 2018 move. And plus, so meaning like it's just so, I don't know, man. It's like the kick return frequencies is just down as a whole. Kicking off, though, as an effective unit, 82, 97, 108, 55, and then 106 in 2021, 115 in 2022, and then 76 last year. Kick returning, obviously with Jalen Jackson, the team just like absolutely exploded over the last 2 years, was a top 20 unit over the last couple of years. That has not been the case before that, though. Since 2017, 58, 117, 116, 52, 64, 16, 14. Looking at how it's been over the years, I have just names from like 2021 just because Chad Ryland and Jake Julian just like kind of held it down for so long. But looking back all the way to 2021, so just like post-COVID, right? Obviously, those two names, like I just said, held it down at kicker and punter for their last years. Hassan Badoun was the leading kick returner. He had 15 kick returns, average of 18.9 per. And then he was also the leading punt returner. But there was not a lot of big plays out of him over those last couple of years. In 2021, had 9 returns for 60 yards, 62 yards, I should say. And then the very next year, 5 returns for 26 yards. Dylan Drummond also had 7 total punt returns over those years for 32 yards. No big game breakers there. And then last year, as a punt returner, Hamza El-Zayed came off injury, did really, really well for himself. 13 returns for 140 yards. Probably the best punt returner in the Creighton era. I don't think that's really hard to say. Kick returns. What'd I say? Hassan Badoun was the lead guy in 2021. And then he worked alongside Jalen Jackson, who really, really took over. Last year, Jalen had, last year, in 2022, his breakout year, 23 returns, 24.8 yards per return, 571 total yards, 1 score. Probably should have had 2. But yeah, that's just for the coulda, shoulda, woulda category. Then Hassan Badoun, Elijah Jackson Anderson, they both had a few returns too, but nothing too much. Hassan Badoun had over 100 yards as a senior. Last year, Jalen Jackson returned, though the book was out on him very, very early in 2022. As soon as that guy started making a bunch of like returns for like 80-something yards, everybody in the nation emailed one another and they said, hey, that guy at Eastern Michigan, don't kick it to him. Swear to God, just don't do it. Like, okay, go ahead and try it, but like just don't kick it to him. Try to kick it over his head. Try to kick it out of bounds. Try to kick it to the other guy on the other side of the field. But don't kick it to 28. Leave him alone. He is a bad man. 18 returns, 405 yards. His average was down by a couple of yards. Still had a score last year. So obviously not everybody got the memo, even though they probably should have. Then Hamza El-Zayat had an average of 23.1 yards on his returns. Obviously not as much as Jalen. I don't remember how many he actually had. But still, it was a talented group, but it takes just killer speed to get that done, man. Like, killer speed. Do they have killer speed again? I don't really know. Let's look at the two deep really quickly. Kicker and punter, those guys are obviously going to be staying the same. There's not really much there. Or like, I should say, like, no real reason to change there. Just looking at their career stats very quickly, though. Jesus Gomez, who impressed in 2022, was perfect on his 47 PAT kicks, not perfect on his field goals, 14 of 17, but still, I mean, it's a forgivable amount, not huge on the frequency, but definitely had a booming leg, long of 55 in 2022, a long of 55 last year. You know, he had the leg to obviously just like boom it for 50 plus. I believe it was the Ball State game in 2022 where like you watch the highlights and you're like, hey, was that 55 yarder good for 70? What the heck? There was a lot of optimism because of that. You know, Chad Ryland, who left for 2022 to go to Maryland, be an aspiring kicker in the NFL, which he ended up being a 4th round pick right after that. Obviously, all of that just kind of hyped up Jesus Gomez a little bit more. Like, hey, yeah, that other guy is going to be off to the NFL, but is there a better one right now? That was kind of the chatter. That died down a little bit last year. 12 of 16 on his kicks, 21 of 24 in the PATs. Just not the kind of second year you wanted to see out of Jesus Gomez, but that's not to say that he can't improve out of that. That's not to say that he's any worse of a kicker. It's just a year that he has to work out of, and he definitely has the capabilities to do that. Mitch Tomasek, back-to-back All-MAC first-team kicker. Let's see. Let me look at his career stats. Actually, let me tell you Jesus's really quickly. I'm sorry. I should have done that already. On field goals, all-time, 26 of 33, 78.8%. Mitch Tomasek on the punts, 116 kicks. Yeah, 116 punts. 5,219 yards. That's an average of 45 yards per punt. 10 touchbacks, 23 are fair caught, 38 landed inside the 20. 33 of them were over 50 yards. Like I said, like he has longs of like 70 plus, like multiple at least. Even if one of them gets waved off. Tomasek, hey man, good ass punter. Good ass punter. You don't want him out there, but boy are you happy to see him, even if you're not happy to see a punter at all. Last year had 67 punts, 45.7 on average. Obviously, those guys are going to be leading the way this year in their positions. What about in the return game, though? Hard to say. On the kick return right now, what's listed are the two leading running backs, Dante McMillan, Elijah Jackson Anderson. I probably should have looked up Dante McMillan's stats to see if he did anything at Weber State. Elijah Jackson Anderson, though, in 2022, he had 5 kicks for 28 yards. I quickly clicked over to Dante McMillan's page from the Weber State website. I'm not seeing anything here in terms of kick returns or any special teams play, so I'm not sure what to expect out of him if I'm being 100% honest with you there. I'm not going to dig any further than that, but it'll be a good audition year for him. Punt returning, this is pretty interesting. Only for like one name, really. Not this first name, Orrin Singleton, Man, a former Akron guy who bounced to the junior college system. at Hutchinson Community College, he had 3 count 'em, punt returns for 26 yards, 8.7 on average. Definitely capable of more. Small, shifty guy, but as long as he's catching the ball clean, that's really all that matters. The biggest thing is just not turning the ball over after a punt, because that's huge swing for the other side. If it's not him, could it be this other guy? Tight end Max Reese. Yes, he's a converted wide receiver and all that, so he definitely has some catch passing ability. But it is just interesting because I don't remember the last time I've seen anybody as a listed tight end out there on the field fielding punts for any team ever. So just that in itself is it's just interesting to me. Like, really? But again, like, it's not about, Max Reese, he's not the like elitist speed or anything like that, but he's a very good athlete, has good, ball catching ability. And that is priority number one in the punt return game. Just field it clean and then make a play second, but you have to field it clean. But yeah, those are the guys. Feel pretty good about kicker and punter, especially at punter. You just want to see more out of Jesus Gomez. And then it's a tryout year for these return men, but it always pretty much is. Like, those are guys that are like, it's just kind of up in the air for them, and field position obviously matters a ton. It doesn't always 100% correlate with the kind of success that you're going to have on the scoreboard. I do have a few more stats. We're not going to go too long with it, I promise, like I already said. But from BCF Toys, like, you could look at, how are teams doing field position-wise? Where do they rank? How are they starting? And then you can just look at traditional stats of, like, hey, how are teams scoring? What's their points per game? Even though that's, like, not the greatest indicator in the world, but it is close enough to where, like, you can kind of vibe with, like, connecting those two dots together. For instance, last year, the net field position, so starting field position of your team, starting field position of the other team, on average, what is that war? That is I can't talk right now. What does that tug of war look like right now? Last year on the net, EMU was 116th nationally. Offensive field position, not great, 121st nationally. Defensive-wise, 104th nationally. Obviously not great in either regard. Scoring-wise, EMU is 120th nationally scoring. That makes sense if you're 121st in starting field position. But defense, for as bad as the field position was, credit to them. They were 69th nationally in scoring defense at 26.7 points per game. So obviously, considering how bad of a start that the defense is usually had to start out with, just because of like how often they were on the field, that has less to. I don't think this number fully encapsulates, because like, hey, this is where like Mitch Tomasek punts were always landing. How would that make any sense? He's got this great leg, but the starting field position for defense is so not good. How does that make sense? I think it has more to do with the offense more than anything. Just like the frequency of just having the defense play out there year in or down in and down out, drive in, drive out, I should say. But the years before that, EMU was pretty good, was a top 50 team in the net. In 21, they were 45. 22, they were 48. Starting field position for offense in 2021, they were 47th, and they finished 51st in scoring. Defensively, they were 45th in defensive field position, 94th in scoring defense, and then that's when they went to the transfer portal, got the linebackers, all that stuff, and then made huge improvements against the run, like we talked about in previous episodes. In 2022, 18th in offensive field position, 55th in scoring. So, like I said, it doesn't always make it 1-to-1, right? There's a huge difference right there, like I just said. But it just does help. Who knows how much worse the scoring would have been in 2022 if Jalen Jackson wasn't there to help bring this team farther along, make them boom to a 18th in starting field position offensively in the nation. Like, it's a good start for them. but also like you can back it up a couple of years. Yes, this is a COVID year, but still numbers are numbers. EMU was 18th nationally in offensive field position in 2020, but was 33rd in points per game. So the field position definitely helps, but you definitely just need to work in concert with other units, because these special teamers do transition your team from offense to defense, defense to offense. Maybe that's a little over-explaining it, but that is the reality of this situation, where these guys do battle for that field position. They do have a lot to say for whether or not your defense holds up. They do have a lot to say for whether or not your running back has a great season. It's these special teamers that help get it done. These are the guys that, you know, they help get it done before your offensive line helps get it done. So kicker, punter, you feel pretty good to very good about those two spots. In the return game, it's fingers crossed, let's make a play, but first, let's make the catch clean.